Hello everyone. We are continuing our process here of discussing theoretical issues for social analysis in Latin America. And today I want to continue with chapter 2 of Brian Smith's book on Catholic versus Pentecostal religion and politics in Latin America. So I'm going to share my screen with you. This is my second attempt to do this. The first was an absolute disaster. I'm sitting on the opposite side of my patio because I can give you a nice background or I can let you see me, but I can't seem to do both. So I decided today I'd let you actually see me with better lighting. So to conclude chapter 1, Smith proposes 3 possible future scenarios for Catholicism and Pentecostalism in Latin America. One would be a mutual flight from the world. That is, both the Catholics and Pentecostals would retreat into what Max Weber calls otherworldly salvation and offer spiritual solace and prayer and a hope for the afterlife to their adherents, and pretty much ignore social and political issues that affect the daily lives of their people. That's one possibility, that both of them would become spiritualized and more privatized. The second one is conflicting religio-political agendas. And it's possible that one or the other would become more pie in the sky, but the other one then, the competitor, would become more active in politics. And so one example of a conflicting agenda is that the Pentecostals are very adamant when they vote Pentecostals into office that they're opposed to the Catholic Church having any official status with the constitution of the government, and they want full separation of church and state. And the Catholic Church, on the other hand, would like to be recognized as an official position with the state. So that's a conflicting agenda. But when it comes to sexual morality, the family, and some of those things, they tend to be in agreement. The third possibility is that they would join forces as prophetic social catalysts. In other words, perhaps both Pentecostals and Catholics would begin to call out their governments on human rights abuses, begin to work together to try to improve working conditions, the economy, and to improve the practical lives for their people. One of the things that he pointed out in the last chapter was that both Catholicism and Pentecostalism are the largest, by far, social movements in Latin America. And so they have the potential to exercise a lot of influence in their societies. Chapter 2, Explanations and Implications of Pentecostal Growth. Why are Pentecostals growing so fast? And there's 3 different theories that he offers. One is an invasion from abroad. This is a criticism of Pentecostals, often voiced by Catholic leaders as well as social scientists. But the idea is that Pentecostals are the point of the spear of American imperialism, neoliberal capitalism, and that it's an unhealthy thing for Latin America to be penetrated by a massive movement of Pentecostals. There is some evidence for this. During the Cold War, the CIA did use American missionaries to gather intelligence on grassroots movements. But in a Senate hearing in 1975, restrictions were passed to prevent the CIA from using churches to advance a geopolitical agenda. However, then in 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected, and he removed the restrictions and began to use every tool at his arsenal to fight Marxism in Central America, particularly Nicaragua and El Salvador. So there was that. Pat Robertson, a TV evangelist, Has been around for a while, helped raise money to support right-wing governments in their fight against Marxism in Central America. He also famously endorsed Efraín Rios Montt, who was a teaching elder at El Venerable Church in Guatemala City and became a dictator of Guatemala, who oversaw a beans or bullets program of pacification that some people believe resulted in a genocide of Mayan peasants. Smith points out that the Catholic Church has also long been a receiver of foreign assistance as well. The Catholic Church has rarely been able to sustain its own leadership from within. A tremendous number of priests all around Latin America, but particularly in Brazil, for one example, are from France, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, the United States, and the Catholic Church has been very dependent upon foreign assistance, both financially as well as leadership. Smith goes on to explain that whatever help Pentecostalism is receiving from the United States, in his analysis, it's not enough to explain the explosive growth, at least not by itself. For one thing, a lot of the Pentecostal churches in Latin America have long time ago separated from their mother denominations and headquarters in the United States and have become independent. Many scholars believe that Pentecostalism is more indigenous to Latin America than other forms of Protestantism or even Catholicism, in the sense that most money and leadership is from Latin America itself. He then provides examples with empirical evidence. A lot of Pentecostal churches, most, if not all Pentecostal churches, easily produce leadership from within, based on charisma. It's much easier to become a Pentecostal leader if you're a good speaker, you're intelligent, you're entrepreneurial, to become a pastor in Pentecostalism than it is to become a priest in the Catholic Church. Smith affirms that most scholars believe that Pentecostalism is a genuinely popular phenomenon, driven by the missionary zeal of its local converts. So a second theory is means of economic achievement. Some scholars believe that people are converting, especially poor and working class people are converting to Pentecostalism because it opens up new avenues of potential economic advancement. Pentecostal churches make a greater effort than Catholic-based communities, the famous SEBs, Comunidades Eclesiales de Base, depending on, I pronounce it sometimes in Portuguese and sometimes in Spanish, but these are basically grassroots Christian communities in the Catholic Church, and they exploded in the 1970s, particularly in Brazil, Nicaragua, also in Mexico, and so they're in some ways similar to small Pentecostal congregations. Pentecostal churches make a much greater effort than these Catholic-based communities to get their husbands to accompany the wives to church. I read a book about this. I read a book about this by anthropologist Elizabeth Brusco. She interviewed hundreds of women in Colombia who were Pentecostal women about why they had left the Catholic Church and become Pentecostal. And it was exactly these reasons. It was the fact that they saw an opportunity to persuade their husband to give up excessive drinking, gambling, smoking, frequenting prostitution, which is such a big part of the stereotype of machismo culture in Latin America. And so her feeling was that these women were making a rational choice to opt for a better deal. By becoming Pentecostals, they could save money, they could preserve the integrity of the family, and they could advance socially in ways they couldn't do in a Catholic ethos. So Pentecostals communities do emphasize attitudes necessary for economic advancement. A commitment to a frugal lifestyle, saving one's earnings, limiting one's consumption are all part of the ethics stressed by Pentecostal pastors. Despite declining inflation, new foreign loans and new investments, and this is contrary to that argument. The poor in Latin America have experienced a steady decline, even as the number of Pentecostals was exploding. The overall number of people living below the poverty line went from 170 million in 1986 to 183 million by the year 2000. So there's evidence that points both ways. The problem with some of the expectations of Pentecostalism will act as a modernizing force in Latin American economies. Now this goes back to Weber's the Protestant work ethic and the spirit of capitalism, which is very influential, but it's also been controversial. There are plenty of people who disagree with this thesis, that a set of Calvinistic doctrines, along with a Protestant inner-worldly asceticism, caused early capitalists in places like Holland, Dutch Reformed, England, the Puritans, and elsewhere, New England, the descendants of the Puritans, to have an affinity for capitalism because they worked very hard. They accumulated a lot of wealth, but they didn't spend it. They just accumulated it to pass on to their heirs, and also to invest. Hence his thesis that this set of beliefs influenced the development of capitalism. Didn't cause it, but influenced it. So there's a number of scholars who are trying to make the same parallel argument with Pentecostals in Latin America. One of those is David Martin, who is a British sociologist who's very optimistic, along with Emilio Williams, and he believes that the rapid growth of Pentecostalism in Latin America is breaking a monopolistic Catholic culture. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You can make the argument that Max Weber saw the rise of capitalism in the modern world as a negative. He talked about man imprisoning himself in a iron cage of his own making, of rationality. And so Weber's point was this is how he thought it came about, but it wasn't necessarily that it was a good thing. And so some people, there would be divided opinions on whether the breaking up of a monopolistic Catholic culture is a good or bad thing. One of the problems with David Martin, and we'll go back to him at the end of the course, is his stereotyping of Catholic culture. He does develop a civilizational argument that there was historical and traditional differences between the Southern Latin culture of Europe versus the Anglo-Saxon culture of Northern Europe. And he believes that these things transferred over into Latin America and North America. And so we'll examine that at the end of the semester. And so he compares the Pentecostals to Methodists in England in the 18th century or the frontier Methodists of the 19th century United States. And he sees a hopeful evidence that Pentecostalism in Latin America will enhance, influence, encourage the development of a modern capitalism and modern development. Then there's a third possibility, a third factor, that some people see the Pentecostals as inherently conservative, legitimizers of political authoritarianism. Some see it as a paternalistic refuge from the secular world, encouraging passivity and dependence on patriarchal pastoral leaders. Others believe that it supports authoritarian political regimes, and he gives the example of Lalive and Bastian. We have a student in Latin American Studies who did a quantitative study over the summer of a number of factors in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala that would encourage people to support authoritarian regimes. And the strongest variable that he found in a quantitative analysis using LAPOP, which is a survey that's done every year in all through the countries of Latin America, The strongest variable he found was a conservative moral ethic.